Before we begin unraveling this ancient and terrifying mystery, don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you're fascinated by the occult, forbidden history and the symbols that rule our world from the shadows. This rabbit hole goes deep, and you'll want to stay until the very end. Now, let's dive into the black cube, the scythe, the rings of time, and the god who devoured his own children. Welcome to the mystery behind the cult of Saturn. For thousands of years, across civilizations, religions and symbols, one dark archetype has lurked just beneath the surface: Saturn. To many, Saturn is merely the sixth planet from the Sun, a ringed gas giant, silently floating in the vastness of space. But to ancient occultists, secret societies and esoteric traditions, Saturn was not just a planet, it was a deity, a force, a prison warden of time, decay and Kari. The Romans worshipped Saturn as the god of wealth, time and agriculture, often represented with a scythe, eerily similar to the Grim Reaper. But what's more disturbing is that Saturn's roots go even deeper, to the Greek god Cronus, who ate his own children to prevent them from overthrowing him. This image, the devourer of the innocent, sets the tone for everything the cult of Saturn came to represent: control, consumption, and sacrifice. In ancient Carthage, children were sacrificed to dark deities under the burning image of Baal, another name believed by many occult scholars to be linked to the Saturnian current. In fact, Saturn was often known as El, the ancient Phoenician god, whose symbol was a black cube, a form echoed across religions and secret orders, from the Kaaba in Mecca to the tefillin worn by devout Jews, from the cube-shaped structures in corporate logos to the architecture of modern tech giants. This cube, this shape, this symbol is everywhere, and it all leads back to Saturn. But why? Why would the symbol of a faraway planet or a forgotten god be etched into the very skeleton of modern civilization? Here's where it gets chilling. According to occult philosophy, Saturn represents limit, form, and law. It is the force that traps spirit into matter. The Saturnian archetype rules over death, aging, restriction, and contracts. Not just legal ones, but spiritual contracts, karmic debts, and ancestral bindings. It is said that Saturn is the warden of this reality, the gatekeeper of reincarnation, the overseer of suffering through time. Many secret societies, like the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, and certain branches of the Illuminati, have allegedly venerated Saturn under various names: Saturn, Saturn, El, Cronus, Ninort. And the more one studies their rituals and symbols, the more one sees the fingerprints of Saturn hidden in plain sight. Consider the ritual of the black robe. Judges, priests, graduates, and executioners all wear it. This black is Saturn's color. The Saturnian current is about hierarchy, control, and the binding of the soul into systemic servitude. And this is not new. It is ancient, whispered across ages in the rites of Babylon, the temples of Rome, the pyramids of Egypt. In astrology, Saturn is called the Greater Malefic, a planet associated with karma, loss, and life's harsh lessons. It moves slowly, and its influence is heavy, often manifesting through suffering, discipline, and delayed gratification. Is it any wonder then that time, the very medium through which we suffer, is ruled by Saturn? And is it any wonder that chronological time comes from Chronos, the Greek name for Saturn? Every tick of the clock, every second that passes, is said to be under the dominion of this ancient entity. But it gets even stranger. Saturn emits a powerful hexagonal storm on its north pole, a six-sided vortex that scientists have observed for decades. This is not science fiction. This is documented NASA data. A perfect hexagon, one of the building blocks of sacred geometry, spins endlessly on a gas giant billions of miles away. Some occult researchers say this is the source of the black cube symbolism, a 3D representation of a hexagon. And in Saturnian worship, this cube represents containment of energy, trapping of spirit, and the crystallization of reality into predictable, controlled form. Look around and you'll see it. The cube in corporate branding, the cube in religious iconography, the cube in AI labs and data servers. It is as if the cult of Saturn is no longer hiding, but proudly flaunting its control. In certain mystical traditions, Saturn is even associated with the demiurge, the false creator god, who built the prison of the material world, as described in Gnostic texts. The idea is that the universe is not a paradise created by a loving God, but a trap engineered by a cold, calculating force, and Saturn is the face of that force. The Gnostics called it Yaldabaoth, the Archon, who traps souls in cycles of ignorance and suffering. In Hinduism, the equivalent would be Shani, the god of karma and retribution, who moves slow and delivers hard lessons, again an echo of the Saturnian current. Even in Christianity, the devil is often linked with time, contracts and law. Think about the old stories of people selling their souls in exchange for earthly gain. These are Saturnian bargains, and they are always rigged. One gives up freedom for power, spirit for material, light for shadow. But perhaps the most disturbing part of all this is the modern Saturnian society we live in. Think about it. We are born, given a name and a number, indoctrinated into schools, which are modeled after prisons, sent to work under artificial lights, in grey cubes, moving to the rhythm of clocks, deadlines and calendars. All Saturn's invention. We are taxed, surveilled, judged, and if we disobey, we are locked in literal cubes called cells. Saturn is the architect of this systemic machine, at least symbolically, and the cult of Saturn thrives in such a world. Its influence is not overt, it is subtle, silent, systemic. It manifests through bureaucracy, legalism, corporate hierarchies, and control mechanisms. It wears the mask of order, but thrives on decay. But not everyone sees Saturn as purely evil. In many mystical schools, Saturn is not the enemy. It is the necessary gatekeeper, the initiator, the shadow that must be faced to reach enlightenment. In alchemy, Saturn is associated with lead, the densest of the base metals. But through the great work, lead can be transformed into gold. In this metaphor, confronting Saturn, understanding and integrating its power, is part of the spiritual path. The true danger, say some mystics, is worshipping Saturn blindly, without transcending it. That's what the cult of Saturn did. They didn't see Saturn as a stepping stone, but as the destination. They venerated limitation, control, and death as divine ends, and their rituals often reflected that. Sacrifice, obedience, blood oaths, and binding spells. You may wonder, how much of this is symbolic, and how much is literal? That depends on how deep you want to go, because if Saturn is a literal force, a consciousness tied to the planet, then the rituals may very well be feeding it energy, even now. And if it's a psychological archetype, then its power lies in how much of humanity's collective behavior it governs. Either way, the result is the same: a society obsessed with time, with punishment, with hierarchy and suffering. The cult of Saturn is not some relic of the past. It is active, present, and institutionalized. It whispers through black robes, tick-tocking clocks, and endless regulations. It governs through systems, not swords, through contracts, not conquest, through cubes, not cathedral. And unless we understand its symbols, its masks, and its rituals, we remain prisoners inside its ring. So the question is, are you bound by Saturn's grip, or will you break the ring and reclaim your soul? If you're still with us, then you already understand We're not talking about superstition. We're talking about a force embedded in the very architecture of our consciousness and the systems that govern the world. The cult of Saturn did not disappear. It embedded itself in the very blueprints of modern power. The black cube is not just a symbol, it is a template, a metaphysical mold, shaping how reality is structured, limiting what can be seen, felt and thought. And here's where the truth gets darker. Saturnian energy feeds on obedience. It rewards those who conform, comply, and accept their role in the machine. Think about it, the obedient worker, the silent citizen, the rote student. These are all modern archetypes, encouraged and rewarded in Saturn's system. Why? Because Saturn rules contractual law. In the occult view, everything you agree to, even unconsciously, becomes a spiritual contract. You sign your life away in paperwork, policies, terms and conditions. And Saturn, the cosmic auditor, enforces the deed. That's why Saturn is feared and revered by occultists. It is the force that locks the soul into matter, the jailer who binds spirit to form, the god who creates the prison of time. Now look at modern society again. Notice how it's obsessed with documentation, time tracking, data logging, surveillance, all Saturnian themes. We are told we are free, but our freedom is constantly measured, timed, evaluated, and taxed. We live not in a democracy, but in a technocratic Saturnian theocracy, where compliance is virtue and deviation is criminal. But this is where we must pause and ask, is Saturn the villain, or is Saturn simply the mirror? A reflection of humanity's own desire for order, stability, and control. After all, Saturn also rules wisdom, maturity, discipline, and spiritual initiation. In mystery traditions, Saturn's influence is the force that tests you before transformation. It breaks you down, imposes harsh trials, and confronts you with your shadow. Only those who survive Saturn's lessons with awareness and integrity are said to escape its grip. In alchemy, this is known as the Nigredo phase, the blackening. It is the dark night of the soul, the ego's destruction, and the chaos before rebirth. And who rules Nigredo? Saturn. In fact, in esoteric astrology, a Saturn return, when Saturn completes its orbit and returns to the same position it held at your birth, is known as a time of intense life change. People lose jobs, relationships, illusions, and are forced to face truth. If they resist, Saturn breaks them. If they accept the lesson, Saturn rewards them with deeper wisdom. But this is personal Saturn, the Saturn of the soul, the Saturn that leads to inner transformation. The cult of Saturn, the version worshipped by elites and embedded into power structures, wants the opposite. It does not want you to transcend, it wants you to comply. It wants you bound in karma, endlessly reincarnating through pain, working to pay off debts you don't remember agreeing to. That is the Saturnian trap. Make the soul forget it is divine by drowning it in rules, fear, and obligation. Now think about the symbols of modern capitalism. Think about the black suit and tie uniforms of businessmen, bankers, judges. These are Saturn's priests. Their temples, banks, which are modeled after Roman basilicas, complete with altars, columns, and ritual language. The word mortgage literally means death pledge. Is that not a Saturnian contract? A lifelong burden signed into law, enforced through fear and scarcity. And what is the dollar sign but a serpent wrapped around a pillar, another ancient Saturnian image? Even the calendar itself is a Saturnian prison, dividing time into grids, days into numbers, life into units of productivity. Who benefits from such division? The answer is simple: those who feed off your energy, who profit from your labor, and who grow stronger every time you comply without questioning. Here's where we reach the esoteric core. Saturn is not just a planet, nor simply a mythological deity. In some systems of occult belief, Saturn is a dimensional frequency, a type of psychic operating system that governs the lower densities of experience. This is why it is said to rule the material world. Spiritually speaking, Saturn represents the density of matter, the heaviness of ego, the limitations of identity. It anchors souls into patterns, karma, lineage, trauma, and makes them forget their origin. Some Gnostic and Hermetic schools go even further. They teach that Saturn is the ruler of the archons, entities that feed on human emotion, especially fear, suffering, and despair. In this view, the cult of Saturn doesn't just maintain systems of control, it harvests the energetic byproduct of those systems. Despair, shame, obedience. These are Saturn's true offerings. This is the black mass of modern society. But not all is hopeless, because knowing is power, and power is what Saturn both fears and respects. Once you understand the contracts you've unknowingly signed, be they mental, emotional, or karmic, you can begin to void them. You can break the loop. Saturn's trap only works if you consent to it. That consent can be subtle, believing you are unworthy, accepting your suffering as fate, obeying authority without inner alignment. But if you reclaim your will, your sovereignty, your inner spark, Saturn can no longer hold you. In fact, Saturn becomes your ally, your teacher, your initiator into mastery. This is the great secret kept hidden by the cult of Saturn, that Saturn once faced can be overcome, that the cube can be unfolded into the cross, a symbol not of death, but of resurrection. Esoterically, the black cube unfolded reveals a cruciform shape, representing expansion of spirit beyond limitation. From this perspective, every cube, every law, every hardship can be transmuted into freedom if faced with truth. And this is where the cult loses its power, because its power lies in deception, in secrecy, in repetition. But once seen, the spell begins to break. You begin to notice how rituals of the Saturn cult appear in media, music, fashion, architecture, and ceremony, not to liberate the masses, but to bind them in glamour. You'll notice how Saturn is exalted in award shows and funerals, corporate launches and political inaugurations. The robes, the symbols, the colors, the numbers, all coded with precision, because the cult of Saturn is not about belief, it is about structure, and structure governs energy. But you, dear viewer, are not just energy. You are awareness itself. You are the observer of the contract, the one who can choose to nullify, to reject, to rewrite. And this is the final, perhaps most dangerous truth. The cult of Saturn is terrified of the awakened individual, not because you overthrow systems, but because you no longer feed them. You walk freely through their courts, their schools, their screens, unbound. You see through the illusion of control. You see Saturn not as a god to fear, but as a shadow to master. And when you master your shadow, you transcend the rings of time. You move from victim to alchemist, from prisoner to initiate. So what now? What will you do with this knowledge? Will you ignore it, bury it, fear it, or will you begin the process of deprogramming, of unbinding yourself from contracts you never consciously made? It begins with a question. Where in your life are you living someone else's design? Where have you traded your spirit for security? Where have you allowed Saturn to define your worth? Ask those questions, sit with them, then act. And understand this: the cult of Saturn may govern the structures of this world, but it cannot touch what is eternal within you. That spark, the one watching this video, the one feeling the truth, that is beyond Saturn. And if you've made it this far, you're no longer just watching a video. You're engaging in initiation. The veil has been lifted. The black cube has cracked. The ring has been broken. Now the work begins. Break your contracts. Question the structures. Reclaim your will. Because Saturn may rule time, but you